Assalamualaikum and hello everyone, especially to our lecturer, Dr. T. To fulfill our assignment purposes for Eppm 4433, we have chosen foreign direct investment, but people usually call it as FDI as our research topic. Myself, NURFARHANAH SHAZNIN, been working together with my other fellow of mine, HIDAYAH HANIM binti MOHAMED, NURFARHANAH binti ADNAN, AINA NADHIRA binti AZMI RAIS, and Nurul Jannah binti Ismail. Before we get started, for your information, we will be sharing this content as shown on the slide briefly from introduction until the conclusion and recommendations. I will start with the background of the research. We have two different kinds of variables, dependent and independent variables, which has political and macroeconomic stability, inflation rate, and population growth rate as our determinants of our dependent variable, which is FDI. Next, the problem statement. First, people will be questioning about the significant impact between FDI and corruption. Secondly, there are some researches about the decline in capital inflows due to high degree of inflation. And the last one is about managerial practices and fertility control are not effective. For the objective, we have two types of objective. For the general one, we need to analyze to look at the long-term relationship between the dependent variable and independent variable from year 1990 to 2020, but in specifically, what we are going to study is about the relationship between foreign direct investment, which is FDI, and political and macroeconomic stability, the relationship between FDI and inflation rate, and the last one is the relationship between FDI and population growth rate. In this essay, we will look at the factors that influence FDI. This research was done to determine whether factors including population growth, inflation, and political and macroeconomic stability will have a positive or negative impact on FDI. We also look into how FDI will impact the economy in this study.
Assalamualaikum and hello, my name is Nurul Jannah binti Ismail, A1755559. For the next part, I will explain about literature review related with our topic. So firstly, I will briefly explain about all of our variables. The first one is foreign direct investment, which is the independent variables of this topic. FDI is the investment made by the party from one country into a business or corporation in another country. Next, we have three for the independent variables. The first one is the political and macroeconomic stability, which is it is establishment of a sophisticated framework of monetary and fiscal institutions and policies to reduce volatility and promote welfare-enhancing growth. The second one is inflation rate, which is about rise in the consumer price index, which is a weighted average of price for various items. And the last one is the population growth rate, explain about the increase in the population of a nation, state, or city. Next, I will proceed for the literature review that I've been read about it that are related to our topic presentation. For the first part of literature review, I will cover up about FDI and political and macroeconomic stability. According to Shahzad and Abdullah 2013, they said about FDI inflows are positively influenced by the GDP growth rate and political stability be a priority for the country's future growth in the both domestic and foreign investment. Next, based on Umar, Adela, and Conrad 2017, the increase between 1957 and 2016 foreign direct investment will help Malaysia's economy shift from a reliance on primary production to the one placed on a greater emphasis on innovation. On the other hand, by referring Nazim Malik and Mansour 2017, based on empirical results obtained from ARDL-bound testing approach, clearly indicate that political stability is co-integrated with FDI and also economic growth. For the next part, I will cover up for FDI and inflation rate. According to Yo Hong and Dayang 2020, the inflation rate has a detrimental impact on foreign direct investment. This is shown that a government should undertake supply, which is the side measures, to reduce inflation and thus encourage foreign direct investment. Others say that inflation rates significantly influence property non-performing loans over longer time periods, followed by GDP, housing price, service tax, and income by Quen Wei, Rosalie, and Yasmin 2021. And the last one, according to Intan, Hani, Haslina, and Xiaojie 2012, also said that inflation played a huge role in FDI in construction sector as inflation has been considered as the most important factor whenever investors are coming to bring an investment into Malaysia. As a result, it is clear that inflation has little bearing on economic growth. And the last one, I will cover up for FDI and population growth rate. According to Asongo 2011, only public investment and population expansion have a long-term positive causal relationship. In the long run, state finance may only be hampered by the need for policies that promote family planning and foster an environment that is favorable for both domestic and international investment. Next, others says that among all potential factors contribute to unemployment, FDI support and foreign workers are significantly reducing the unemployment rate in Malaysia. This is clearly seen from 1982 to 1991, where the unemployment reached 7.5%, and rapid FDI reduced it significantly by Hamidah, Rospat Zimi, Hassan Halim, and Nur Azila 2016. And the last one for FDI and population growth rates, according to Azim, Rahim, Shahidan, Hayati, and Iham 2021, also said that they should limit the number of immigrants to come to the country and encourage couple live to not only focus on quality life but also have children for the long-term benefit to the country. As a closure, based on the result of our review, some authors present theoretical reasoning and empirical evidence to demonstrate that robust population expansion boosts economic growth, while others discovers evidence to support the opposite conclusion.
Next, AINA HIDAYAH HANIM BINTI Muhammad HARUDDIN, number matric A1736559, will present about data and methodology. For data collection, we use secondary data, and all our secondary data are collected from 1990 to 2020. Data for political and macroeconomic stability, inflation rate, population growth rate, and foreign direct investment are collected from World Bank data. For data analysis, we choose to analyze descriptive analysis, coefficient correlation, and regression analysis. The descriptive analysis shows us the pattern of the data that we collected and summarize our data, while for the coefficient correlation and regression analysis, we use to measure the relationship between our variables. Next, I will continue about findings. First part is about descriptive analysis. Now we can see the analysis and graph about foreign direct investment. From that, we can see the maximum value for the total foreign direct investment is in between the second and third quarter of 1992, while the minimum value is in the first quarter of 2009. Next, we can see analysis and graph of political and macroeconomic stability. For this independent variable, we use data of GDP. From slide, we can see the maximum value for the political and macroeconomic stability is in between the second and third quarter of 1996, while the minimum value is in the first quarter of 1998. Next is analysis and graph of inflation rate. From graph, we can conclude the maximum value for the total inflation rate is in between the second and third quarter of 2008, while the minimum value is in the first quarter of 2009. Last part of descriptive analysis is about population growth rate. From this analysis and graph, we can see the maximum value for the total population growth rate is between the second and third quarter of 1990, while the minimum value is the first quarter of 2020. That's all for me. I will pass next part to my friends.
My name is NURFARHANAH binti Anna with my metric number A173901. Okay, I will continue this presentation by explaining about correlation tests. Okay, the first one is the correlation between FDI and GDP. Okay, based on the table, we can see that the R between FDI and GDP is 0.67, 856, 8362. Okay, based on the graph, the strength and the direction of the relationship are moderate and positive respectively. It means that when GDP increase, the FDI will also increase. Since the p-value is 0.9999, it's 6398, which is more significant than 0.05, we do not reject the null hypothesis because the correlation is not statistically significant. So we can conclude that there is not a significant correlation between FDI and GDP. Okay, the second one is the correlation between FDI and IR. Okay, based on the table, the correlation between FDI and IR is 0.32590839. Okay, based on the graph, we can see that the strength of the relationship is weak while the direction of the relationship is positive. It means that when IR increase, the FDI will also increase. Okay, the p-value is 0.9632165, which is bigger than 0.05. So we do not reject the null hypothesis because the correlation is not statistically significant. Hence, we conclude that there is not a significant correlation between FDI and IR. Okay, the last one is the correlation between FDI and PGR. Okay, the correlation between FDI and PGR is 0.572161716. Based on the graph, the strength and the direction of the relationship are moderate and positive respectively. It means that when PGR increase, the FDI will also increase. Since the p-value is 0.999614585, which is more significant than 0.05, we do not reject the null hypothesis because the correlation is not statistically significant, so that we can conclude that there is not a significant correlation between FDI and PGR.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is AINA binti RAIS A175443. I will present and explain about regression analysis. Firstly, multiple linear regression is the most common form of the regression analysis. As a predictive analysis, multiple linear regression is used to describe data and to explain the relationship between one dependent variable and two or more independent variables. From the data, the regression statistic and analysis p-value for total FDI, political and microeconomic stability, inflation rate and population growth rate is less than or equal to the significant level, which is 13.1366153. Then R square are the percentage of variation is response that will explain the model. The higher the R2 value, the better the model fits the data. The table shows 0.59345 that are lower than 0%. Then S is measured in the units of the response variable and represent how far the data value fall from the fitted value. The amount of S is low, which is 1.29834, and lastly F statistic 13.1366153, and we can see that the p-value is 0.000177421, which means this analysis model is significant because the p-value is less than 0.05. Therefore, we can conclude that this model shows statistically significant between the independent variable and dependent variable.
The conclusion that we can make here from the entire slides we have shared, we can conclude that the dependent variables and FDI is correlated. It also can help policymakers to figure out how to increase FDI inflows into Malaysia. Lastly, these all researchers can be a guide to all new practitioners in decision making. After we go through the data, we will recommend to others to increase sample size to all researchers and do the data within monthly, quarterly, semi-annual instead of annually. And we will also recommend to government create policy for the better FDI inflows.
That's all for our group presentation. Thank you.